The casket was ivory white with gold handles, positioned perfectly on the green velvet straps above the open grave. Late morning sun filtered through the oak trees at Riverside Memorial Gardens, casting shadows across the 24 mourners dressed in black. Simone would have hated this, thought Jerome as he crouched behind a marble mausoleum 50 feet away, his hands shaking, his heart pounding so hard he could barely breathe. He watched the man everyone called Preston Douglas stand at the head of the grave, dabbing at dry eyes with a handkerchief. Next to him stood a woman in a black dress and designer sunglasses, her hand resting possessively on Preston's arm. Jerome had seen that woman before 3 days ago on the boat with Preston. The boat where they'd thrown Simone into the water like she was garbage. The minister was speaking, his voice carrying across the cemetery. "We gather today to remember Simone Douglas, taken from us too soon in a tragic boating accident." Jerome felt his stomach turn. There had been nothing accidental about what happened on that boat. Her husband Preston asks that we remember Simone's kindness, her dedication to her work, her bright spirit. Jerome almost laughed at that. Preston didn't know anything about Simone's bright spirit. Jerome knew more about Simone's spirit from 3 days of watching her fight to survive in his warehouse shelter than Preston apparently knew from 5 years of marriage. The minister nodded to the funeral director, who stepped forward to activate the mechanism that would lower the casket into the ground. This was it. This was the moment. If Jerome didn't act now, they would bury an empty casket and Preston would get away with murder. Except Simone wasn't dead. Jerome stood up, his legs unsteady beneath him. He was wearing the cleanest clothes he had, which wasn't saying much. 3 days ago, he'd been sleeping under the bridge by the river, collecting cans and bottles to recycle for money to eat. Now he was about to walk into a funeral full of rich people and blow their whole world apart. He started walking toward the grave site. "The Lord is my shepherd," the minister began. Jerome walked faster. "I shall not want." People started turning to look at him. A woman gasped. A man stepped forward as if to block Jerome's path, but Jerome kept walking, his eyes locked on Preston. "He makes me lie down in green pastures." "Stop!" Jerome shouted. His voice cracked from lack of use from 3 days of barely speaking. "Bring her out. She's alive." The minister stopped mid-verse, his mouth hanging open. Preston's face went white. The woman next to him gripped his arm so hard her knuckles turned pale. "She's alive." Jerome shouted again, reaching the edge of the grave. "Simone Douglas is alive. I pulled her out of the river 3 days ago. She's not in that casket." The crowd erupted. People were standing, shouting questions, pulling out phones. The funeral director rushed forward, along with 2 security guards Jerome hadn't noticed before. "Sir, you need to leave," one of the guards said, grabbing Jerome's arm. "I'm not leaving." Jerome yanked his arm free. "That man tried to murder his wife." He pointed at Preston. "I saw him. I saw him push her off the boat. I saw that woman with him." He pointed at Veronica. Preston finally found his voice. "This man is clearly disturbed. I don't know who he is or what he wants, but my wife died 3 days ago. I identified her body myself." "You identified a Jane Doe from the county morgue." Jerome shot back. "I read about it in the newspaper. Some woman who drowned 2 weeks ago that nobody claimed. You paid someone to say it was Simone." That wasn't exactly true. Jerome didn't know for sure if Preston had paid anyone. But Simone had told him that's what Preston must have done, because she was very much alive. A woman in the crowd spoke up. "Jerome? Jerome Banks." Jerome turned. He recognized her vaguely. She'd given him money once, maybe twice, when he was panhandling downtown. "You used to work at Morrison Tech," the woman said. Before you lost everything." Jerome nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I did. And I'm not crazy, I'm not lying, and I'm not leaving until someone opens that casket and proves Simone Douglas isn't in there." Preston's lawyer, a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit, stepped forward. "Mr. Douglas has been through enough. This is harassment. Someone call the police." "Yes," Jerome said loudly. "Please call the police. Because Simone Douglas is alive, she's hiding right now, and she wants to press charges against her husband for attempted murder." The crowd exploded again. Preston looked like he might faint. Veronica had gone perfectly still, her face unreadable behind her sunglasses. The minister cleared his throat. Perhaps we should open the casket. Just to settle this matter." "Absolutely not," Preston's lawyer said. "This is a sacred ceremony and we will not desecrate." "Open it," said a woman from the crowd. "If this man is lying, we'll all see it." If he's telling the truth. She didn't finish the sentence. The funeral director looked at Preston. Preston looked at his lawyer. His lawyer looked furious, but he gave a tiny nod. Fine, the funeral director said. But if this turns out to be some kind of sick prank? It's not, Jerome said quietly. The funeral director and his assistant worked to open the casket latches. The crowd pressed closer. Jerome held his breath. He'd never actually seen inside the casket himself. He was taking Simone's word for it that she wasn't in there. What if he was wrong? What if Preston had somehow actually buried her? What if this was all some confused hallucination from living on the streets too long? The lid opened. Inside the casket, nestled on white satin, was a sandbag. Just a plain sandbag, the kind used for flood control, wrapped in a white sheet. A woman screamed. Preston started backing away from the grave. Someone shouted, "Call the police." Jerome pulled out the prepaid cell phone Simone had given him that morning. He dialed the number she'd made him memorize. She answered on the first ring. "Did they open it?" Simone asked. "They opened it," Jerome said. "Good," Simone said. "Tell them I'm on my way." Jerome looked at Preston, who was now arguing frantically with his lawyer while Veronica tried to pull him toward the parking lot. He looked at the crowd of shocked mourners, at the empty casket, at the security guards who didn't know whether to grab him or Preston. "She's on her way," Jerome announced. "Simone Douglas is alive and she's coming here right now." In the distance, Jerome heard sirens. Simone stared at the spreadsheet on her laptop, double-checking the calculations for the third time. The numbers didn't lie. MediPharm Solutions was losing market share, and if her projections were correct, they'd lose their biggest client within 6 months unless they changed their pricing strategy. She typed up her analysis and sent it to her supervisor with a note. "Urgent. We need to discuss the Fletcher account." Then she closed her laptop and checked the time. 6:47 p.m. Preston would be home soon, probably annoyed that dinner wasn't ready yet. Their townhouse in the Harbor District was beautiful, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. It was also cold and empty, decorated by Preston's interior designer in shades of gray and white that Simone had never liked. She'd wanted warm colors, family photos, plants. Preston said those things were clutter. Simone walked to the kitchen and started pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. She'd make pasta. It was quick and Preston liked pasta. She'd learned over 5 years of marriage that keeping Preston happy meant anticipating what he wanted before he knew he wanted it. Her phone rang. A known number. Simone almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello? Is this Simone Douglas? Formerly Simone Patterson?" A man's voice, professional, slightly formal. "Yes, this is she. Ms. Douglas, my name is Harold Chin. I'm an attorney with Chen and Associates. I represent the estate of Eleanor Patterson, Simone's grandmother. Eleanor had died 4 months ago, at 93, in her sleep at the assisted living facility where she'd spent her last 2 years. Simone had been at the funeral, had cried over the woman who'd raised her after Simone's parents died in a car crash when she was 7. I thought the estate was settled," Simone said. "The primary estate has been distributed, yes. But there's a matter that your grandmother requested remain confidential until specific conditions were met. Those conditions have now been satisfied. I need to meet with you to discuss the Eleanor Patterson Trust." "The what?" "The trust your grandmother established 30 years ago. Ms. Douglas, this is not a conversation we should have over the phone. Are you available tomorrow morning? Say 10 o'clock at my office." Simone thought about her work schedule. She had a conference call at 9, but she could move it. "Yes, I can do that." "Excellent. I'll text you the address. And Ms. Douglas? I'd suggest you come alone. This information is sensitive." The call ended. Simone stared at her phone, confused. A trust? Her grandmother had lived comfortably but simply. She'd had a nice house, a decent pension from teaching, some savings. Nothing that would require a mysterious attorney and secret meetings. The front door opened. Preston walked in, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder, his phone pressed to his ear. He was laughing at something the person on the other end said. When he saw Simone, his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'll call you back," Preston said into the phone. He hung up and kissed Simone on the cheek. "Hey babe, what's for dinner?" "Pasta. It'll be ready in 20 minutes. "Perfect. I'm starving." He loosened his tie and headed upstairs. "I need to jump on one more call, then I'm all yours." Simone heard him close the bedroom door. She heard his voice start up again, muffled through the floor. He was laughing again, that same laugh he'd used on the first call. She told herself she was being paranoid. Preston was in commercial real estate development. He took a lot of calls. He laughed with clients and business partners all the time. It didn't mean anything. Except lately he'd been taking more and more calls in private. He'd been coming home later. He'd been distant, distracted. When Simone tried to talk to him about it, he told her she was imagining things, that work was just stressful right now. Simone pushed the thoughts away and focused on cooking. The pasta water was boiling. She added the penne and stirred, watching the water foam up around the edges of the pot. Her phone buzzed with a text from the attorney. His office was downtown in one of the new high-rises. She saved the address and went back to cooking. 20 minutes later, they were sitting at the dining room table, Preston scrolling through his phone while eating. Simone picked at her pasta, not really hungry. "I have a meeting tomorrow morning," she said. "About my grandmother's estate." Preston looked up. "I thought that was all settled. Apparently there's a trust or something. The lawyer wouldn't give me details over the phone." Preston's eyes sharpened with interest. "A trust? Like money?" "I don't know. Probably just paperwork." "Huh." Preston went back to his phone, but Simone could see the wheels turning in his head. "Well, let me know what it is. If it's anything significant, we'll want to talk to our financial advisor." "Sure," Simone said. They finished dinner in silence. Preston went back to his calls. Simone cleaned up the kitchen, loaded the dishwasher, wiped down the counters. Then she went upstairs to their bedroom and found Preston packing a small suitcase. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Oh, I forgot to tell you. I have to fly to Chicago tomorrow morning. Property inspection on the lakefront development. I'll be back Thursday." "Oh." Simone felt a strange relief. If Preston was gone, she could go to the attorney meeting without him asking questions. "Okay." Preston zipped the suitcase and turned to look at her. For just a second, Simone saw something in his eyes she didn't recognize. Something cold. But then he smiled and pulled her into a hug. "I'll miss you," he said. "Miss you too," Simone replied automatically. That night, she lay in bed next to Preston, listening to him breathe. She used to find the sound comforting. Now it just reminded her how far apart they'd grown. The next morning, Preston left for the airport at 6. Simone got ready slowly, picking out a conservative navy dress and low heels. At 9:45, she parked in the underground garage of the high-rise and took the elevator to the 14th floor. The law office was all dark wood and leather furniture. The receptionist led Simone to a conference room where Harold Chin was waiting. He was in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Ms. Douglas, thank you for coming." He gestured to a chair. "Can I get you coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you." Chin sat down across from her and opened a thick folder. "I'll get straight to the point. Your grandmother, Eleanor Patterson, established a trust in 1995 with the specific instruction that you were not to know about it until you turned 35 or she passed away, whichever came first." "I don't understand. Why would she keep it secret?" "Your grandmother was a very wise woman. She wanted you to build your own life, your own career, without the influence of knowing you would eventually inherit a substantial sum. She also wanted to protect you from people who might befriend you or marry you for your money." Simone's stomach dropped. "How much money are we talking about?" Chin slid a document across the table. Simone looked at the number at the bottom of the page. She looked again. The number didn't change. That can't be right." "It's correct. Your grandmother inherited a significant sum from her father, your great-grandfather, who made his fortune in pharmaceutical patents in the 1960s. She invested wisely and lived frugally. The trust is currently valued at $2.3 billion. The room tilted. Simone gripped the edge of the table. "Billion? With a B?" "Yes. The trust releases to you in full on your 35th birthday, which is..." He checked his papers. 3 weeks from now. Happy early birthday, Ms. Douglas. You're about to become one of the wealthiest women in the state." Simone couldn't breathe. $2.3 billion. Her grandmother, who'd lived in a modest 2-bedroom house and clipped coupons, had been sitting on $2.3 billion. Why didn't she tell me? Why didn't she use it? She lived in that assisted living facility. Your grandmother chose to live simply. She didn't want wealth to define her life or yours. But she did want to ensure your future was secure. Hence the trust. Chin spent the next hour explaining the details. The money was held in various investments, real estate, and securities. Simone would have full control in 3 weeks. Until then, the trust was managed by a board of advisors her grandmother had appointed. "I need you to sign some preliminary documents today," Chin said. "And I strongly advise you not to tell anyone about this until the official transfer date." Not your friends, not your family, not my husband? Simone asked quietly. Chen's expression was carefully neutral. That's your decision. But I will say that your grandmother specifically included provisions to protect the trust from marital property claims. Should you divorce, the trust and all its assets would remain solely yours. Simone thought about Preston asking about the trust last night. The interest in his eyes. The way he'd immediately thought about money. I won't tell him, she said. Not yet. A wise choice, Chen said. Simone signed the papers, shook Chen's hand and walked out of the office in a daze. $2.3 billion. She was going to be a billionaire in 3 weeks. She sat in her car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, trying to process it all. Then she drove home, her mind spinning with possibilities and questions. What would she do with that kind of money? How would it change her life? Should she tell Preston? She pulled into the driveway of their townhouse and sat there, staring at the front door. Through the front window, she could see the gray and white living room that had never felt like home. Simone pulled out her phone and called Preston. He didn't answer. She tried again. Voicemail. She texted, "Call me when you can. Important." No response. Simone went inside, kicked off her heels and collapsed on the couch. Her phone was still in her hand. She stared at it, waiting for Preston to call back. He didn't. What Simone didn't know was that at that exact moment, Preston was sitting in Veronica's apartment downtown, his phone silenced, his wedding ring on the coffee table, telling his business partner and secret girlfriend of 2 years that they needed to move up their timeline. And neither of them knew that Preston's phone call to Simone had accidentally left a voicemail earlier that morning, still in his outbox, where he'd been talking to Veronica about getting rid of the problem and making sure the timing was right. Simone wouldn't find that voicemail until it was almost too late. Simone spent the next 2 days in a fog. She went to work, sat through meetings about pharmaceutical pricing strategies and market analysis, and came home to an empty townhouse. Preston texted once from Chicago saying the property inspection was taking longer than expected. He'd be home Friday instead of Thursday. She didn't tell him about the trust. Every time she thought about it, something held her back. Maybe it was the attorney's warning. Maybe it was the way Preston's eyes had lit up when she'd mentioned her grandmother's estate. Maybe it was just instinct. On Wednesday evening, Simone was heating up leftovers when her phone rang. Harold Chen. Miss Douglas, I apologize for calling so late. But something concerning has come to my attention. Simone's heart sank. What is it? I had my assistant run a routine background check on your husband as part of our standard security protocols. Miss Douglas, did you know that Preston took out a life insurance policy on you 3 months ago? Simone set down the plate she was holding. What? No. I didn't sign anything. The signatures appear to be forged, though we'd need a handwriting expert to confirm. The policy is for $500,000, with Preston as the sole beneficiary. The kitchen suddenly felt very cold. $500,000? I've contacted the insurance company. They're launching an investigation. But Miss Douglas, I need to ask you this directly. Do you feel safe in your marriage? Did she feel safe? Simone thought about Preston's recent distance. The private phone calls. The business trips. The way he'd asked about the trust with such pointed interest. I don't know, she said honestly. I think you should come back to the office tomorrow. There are some things you need to see. The next morning, Simone called in sick to work and drove downtown. This time, Chin had another man with him, a private investigator named Thomas Reeves. Ms. Douglas, Reeves said, sliding a folder across the table. These are photos taken over the last 6 weeks. I'm sorry to have to show you this. Simone opened the folder. The first photo showed Preston outside a downtown apartment building with a woman. The woman had dark hair and was laughing at something Preston said. The second photo showed them kissing. The third showed them entering the apartment together. There were a dozen more photos. Preston and the woman at restaurants. Preston and the woman at a hotel. Preston and the woman shopping together, his arm around her waist. Her name is Veronica Grant, Reeves said. She's Preston's business partner in the real estate company. According to our investigation, they've been involved for approximately 2 years. 2 years. Simone had been married to Preston for 5 years. He'd been cheating for almost half their marriage. There's more, Chin said gently. The life insurance policy was purchased shortly after you called Preston to tell him about meeting with me. Based on the timeline, we believe he may have suspected you were inheriting money. Simone's hands were shaking. You think he took out the policy because he thinks I'm getting money? We think it's a possibility. Combined with the affair and the forged signatures, we felt it was important to warn you. But I didn't tell him about the trust. He doesn't know about the $2.3 billion. Chin and Reeves exchanged glances. Ms. Douglas, Chin said carefully, people have been killed for far less than $500,000. If Preston suspects you're inheriting any significant amount, you could be in danger. Simone felt like the floor was dropping out from under her. You think he'd hurt me? Kill me? I think you should take precautions. Don't be alone with him. Consider staying somewhere else. We can help you consult with attorneys about divorce proceedings and protective measures. Simone drove home with the photos in her purse, her mind reeling. Preston would be back tomorrow. What was she supposed to do? Confront him? Run? Pretend everything was fine? She pulled into the driveway and saw Preston's car. He was home early. Simone's heart started racing. She grabbed her phone ready to call. Who? The police? Chin. She had photos of an affair, not proof of danger. She took a deep breath and went inside. Preston was in the living room packing another suitcase. He looked up when she came in and his smile was warm and genuine. For a second, Simone saw the man she'd married, the man who'd proposed to her on a beach at sunset, who'd promised to love her forever. Hey babe. Surprise. The Chicago trip got finished early so I came home. But I have good news. I planned a special anniversary trip for us this weekend. Remember how we always talked about going to Lake Serenity? I booked that cabin you loved. Their anniversary. Simone had completely forgotten. 5 years. That's great, she managed. I thought we could use some time away. Just the two of us. No phones, no work, just us. Preston walked over and kissed her. Simone forced herself not to pull away. I've missed you. Missed you too. We leave Friday morning. I already cleared your schedule with your supervisor. 3 days at the lake. It'll be perfect. Something about the way he said perfect made Simone's skin crawl. She thought about the life insurance policy. The forged signatures. The affair. The timing. That sounds wonderful, Simone lied. That night, she lay in bed next to Preston, pretending to sleep. He was scrolling through his phone, the blue light casting shadows on his face. She watched him through half-closed eyes and saw him texting someone. All set for the weekend. She doesn't suspect anything. Then he deleted the message. Simone waited until Preston was asleep. Then she carefully got out of bed and went to the bathroom. She pulled out her phone and called Chen's emergency number. He's planning something, she whispered. This weekend at Lake Serenity. I think he's going to try to kill me. Can you leave? Right now. If I leave, he'll know something's wrong. He'll change his plans. Ms. Douglas. I want to catch him. I want evidence. Can you help me? There was a long pause. This is extremely dangerous. I know. But if I run, I'll spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. I need to know the truth. I need proof. Another pause. I'll make some calls. But Ms. Douglas, if I arrange this, you have to promise me you'll be careful. One wrong move and... I understand, Simone said. What she didn't understand was just how wrong things would go. Friday morning arrived gray and cloudy with fog rolling in from the water. Simone loaded her suitcase into Preston's Mercedes SUV and climbed into the passenger seat. In her pocket was a small recording device Chin had given her. In her other pocket was a GPS tracker linked to Reeves' phone. You sure you want to do this? Chin had asked last night. I'm sure, Simone had replied. Now, driving north toward Lake Serenity, she wasn't so sure anymore. Preston was cheerful, chatting about the cabin, about the hiking trails, about the restaurant he'd made reservations at for their anniversary dinner tomorrow. He reached over and squeezed her hand. His palm was sweaty. I'm really glad we're doing this, he said. I feel like we've been distant lately. This will be good for us. Yeah, Simone said. Good for us. They arrived at the cabin around noon. It was beautiful, a modern A-frame structure right on the water, with a private dock and a small boat tied up. Preston had thought of everything. That's what worried her. They unpacked. Preston suggested they take the boat out before lunch. The weather's supposed to get worse later. We should enjoy the water while we can. Simone's heart started pounding. This was it. Whatever Preston was planning, it would happen on the boat. She touched the recording device in her pocket. Sure, she said. Let me just grab my jacket. In the bedroom she texted Reeves, on the boat now. His response was immediate. We're in position. Be careful. Reeves and his team were stationed at a campground half a mile down the shore. If anything went wrong, they could get there in minutes. Simone put on her life jacket and joined Preston at the dock. The boat was a small cabin cruiser, nice but not extravagant. Preston helped her climb in, his hands gentle and careful. Then he untied the lines and started the engine. They motored out into the lake. The water was calm, the fog getting thicker. Within minutes, Simone couldn't see the shore anymore. They were alone, surrounded by gray mist. Preston cut the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Preston said, coming to stand next to her at the railing. "So peaceful." Simone's mouth was dry. "Yeah, peaceful. I brought wine. Let me grab it." Preston disappeared into the cabin. Simone pulled out her phone. No signal. Of course there wasn't. They were too far from shore. The GPS tracker was still working though. Reeves would know where she was. Preston emerged with 2 glasses of red wine. He handed one to Simone. "To 5 years?" he said, raising his glass. "To 5 years?" Simone echoed. She didn't drink. Preston noticed. "What's wrong?" "I'm just feeling a little seasick." "Wine will help. Drink up." Simone looked at the wine. Was it drugged? Was this how he'd planned to do it? Make it look like she'd gotten drunk and fallen overboard? "Preston," she said carefully, "there's something I need to tell you." "Oh." His expression was pleasant, curious. "I know about Veronica." Preston's face went blank. "What?" "I know you're having an affair. I've seen the photos. I know about the life insurance policy you took out on me. I know you forged my signature." For a moment, Preston just stared at her. Then he started laughing. "Oh, Simone. You think you're so smart, don't you? I want a divorce." "A divorce?" Preston's laughter stopped. "You stupid woman. You think I'm going to let you divorce me? Do you have any idea how much money you're about to inherit?" Simone's blood went cold. "How did you?" "I heard you on the phone with the lawyer. $2.3 billion. Did you really think you could keep that from me? From your husband? That money is mine. It's protected." "Not if you're dead," Preston said calmly. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small bottle. "I drugged your wine, obviously. You were supposed to drink it and pass out, and then I'd push you overboard. Tragic anniversary accident. Grieving widower. And as your husband, I'd contest that trust. I'd get something. Maybe not billions, but enough." Simone's hand went to her pocket, to the recording device. She hoped it was picking this up. "But you just had to be clever," Preston continued. "You just had to figure it out. So now we do this the hard way." He lunged at her. Simone tried to run, but there was nowhere to go on the small boat. Preston grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. She struggled, screaming, but there was no one to hear. "Help!" she screamed into the fog. "Help me!" Preston slapped her hard. Simone tasted blood. He dragged her toward the railing. "You should have just drunk the wine," he said. "This would have been easier." The cabin door opened. Veronica stepped out, holding a boat hook. "What's taking so long?" she asked, annoyed. Simone's shock gave Preston the opening he needed. He shoved her backward. Simone felt her body hit the railing, felt herself tipping over, felt the cold water rushing up to meet her. She hit the lake hard. The life jacket kept her on the surface for a moment, but Preston was leaning over the railing, pushing her head under with the boat hook. Water filled her mouth, her lungs. She couldn't breathe. She was drowning. Through the water, she could hear Veronica's voice. "Is she dead?" "Not yet. Hold on." The pressure on Simone's head increased. Her vision was going dark. This was it. This was how she died. Then the pressure released. Simone's head broke the surface. She gasped, coughing water, trying to suck in air. Through blurring vision, she saw the boat speeding away. She tried to call out, but her voice was gone. She was alone in the middle of the lake, in the fog, water filling her lungs. She was going to die anyway. Simone felt herself sinking. The life jacket was waterlogged, not helping anymore. Her arms were too heavy to swim. This was it. Then a hand grabbed her collar. "I got you," a voice said. "I got you. Just hold on." Simone couldn't see who it was. Everything was gray and cold and fading. But strong arms were pulling her through the water, toward shore, toward air, toward life. She lost consciousness. The last thing she heard was the voice saying, "Stay with me. Please stay with me." Jerome pulled the woman onto the riverbank, his arms screaming with exhaustion. He'd been checking his bottle traps when he'd heard the screaming from the lake. By the time he'd gotten his inflatable raft from his camp and rowed out into the fog, the woman had been underwater. He'd found her purely by luck, grabbing her jacket just before she sank out of reach. Now she was on the shore, not breathing. Jerome had been a lifeguard once, decades ago, before everything fell apart. The training came back. Chest compressions. 30 of them. then 2 rescue breaths. Repeat. Water poured from the woman's mouth. She coughed, sputtered, and then started breathing on her own. Thank God, Jerome whispered. Thank God. He looked around. The fog was so thick he could barely see 10 feet. He could hear a boat engine in the distance moving away. Whoever had pushed this woman into the water was leaving her to die. Jerome pulled the woman's wallet from her jacket pocket. Simone Douglas. She had an address in the Harbor District, an insurance card, credit cards. She was somebody, not homeless like him. He couldn't take her to a hospital. He had no money, no ID, no way to explain how he'd found her. And if someone had tried to kill her once, they might try again. Jerome made a decision. He lifted Simone into his arms and carried her back to his camp, a half-collapsed warehouse by the river where he'd lived for the past 6 months. It wasn't much, but it was dry and hidden. He laid her on his sleeping bag and covered her with every blanket he had. She was breathing but barely. Her skin was ice cold. She needed a hospital. But Jerome had seen the boat speeding away. He'd seen them leave her to drown. Taking her to a hospital might be signing her death warrant. I'm sorry, he told her unconscious form. I'll do my best. I promise I'll do my best. For 3 days, Jerome kept Simone alive with bottled water, canned soup heated over a camping stove, and sheer determination. He used his recycling money to buy fever medication when she developed pneumonia from the water in her lungs. He stayed awake for hours, watching her breathe, terrified she'd stop. On the 3rd day, Jerome found a discarded newspaper in a dumpster. The headline made his blood run cold. Local woman dies in boating accident, funeral set for Saturday. There was a photo of Simone smiling at some charity event. The article said she drowned during an anniversary trip to Lake Serenity. Her husband, Preston Douglas, had identified the body. Funeral services would be held at Riverside Memorial Gardens. Jerome looked at Simone, who was sleeping fitfully on his camping mat. She was alive. But according to the newspaper, she was dead. He read the article again, paying attention to the details. The body had been found 2 weeks ago, unidentified, presumed to be a drowning victim. Preston had claimed it was Simone. It was a lie. All of it. Jerome went back to where Simone lay. Her eyes were open, looking at him. Welcome back, he said gently. Where am I? Her voice was raspy, weak. Safe. You're safe. Preston, he tried to. She started coughing. I know. I saw. I pulled you out of the water. Tears started running down Simone's face. He's going to get away with it. He's going to say I'm dead and he's going to take my money and... No, he's not, Jerome said firmly. He showed her the newspaper. He thinks you're dead. He's having your funeral tomorrow. Simone read the article. Her expression changed from fear to something else. Something harder. Then let's go to my funeral, she said. The warehouse had been abandoned for years, windows broken, walls covered in graffiti, but Jerome had made a small corner of it livable. He'd hung tarps to block the wind, gathered discarded furniture, even run an extension cord from a working outlet in an adjacent building that still had power. It wasn't much, but it had kept him alive through 2 winters. Now it was keeping Simone alive. She drifted in and out of consciousness for hours after reading the newspaper article. Jerome would wake her every few hours to make her drink water or eat a few spoonfuls of soup. Her fever climbed, then broke, then climbed again. She talked in her sleep, crying out about water, about drowning, about Preston's hands pushing her under. Jerome stayed with her through all of it. On what he thought was the 4th day since pulling her from the lake, Simone finally woke up fully lucid. She looked around the warehouse, taking in the camping equipment, the carefully organized supplies, the makeshift shelter. How long have you lived here? She asked. About 6 months, Jerome said. He was heating soup on the camping stove, the smell of chicken and vegetables filling the small space. Lost my apartment last year. Lost my job before that. The usual story. What did you do? Before? I was a software engineer at Morrison Tech. Had a house, a car, a 401k. Then my wife got cancer. The medical bills bankrupted us. She died anyway. I started drinking. Lost the job, lost the house, lost everything. Jerome stirred the soup, not looking at her. Been on the streets ever since. I'm sorry. Don't be. I made my choices. He poured soup into a clean bowl and brought it to her. Your turn. Why did your husband try to kill you? Simone told him everything. The inheritance. The affair. The life insurance policy. The planned murder. Jerome listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker. $2.3 billion, he said when she finished. That's a lot of reason to kill someone. He won't get it. The trust is protected. But he doesn't know that. He thinks he can contest it, get something. And the girlfriend? Veronica. She was on the boat. She helped him. Jerome pulled out the newspaper article again. Says here your funeral is tomorrow at noon. Riverside Memorial Gardens. Simone looked at the article, at her own smiling photo, at Preston's quote about his beloved wife. Rage burned through the fog of illness in her mind. I want to go, she said. To your own funeral? I want to stop it. I want to stand up in front of everyone and show them what he did. That's dangerous. If he tried to kill you once. He thinks I'm dead. He won't be expecting me. Simone struggled to sit up. You said you saw them leave me in the water. You're a witness. I'm homeless. Nobody's going to believe me. I'll believe you. The police will believe you when I'm standing there alive, telling them what happened. Jerome considered this. You sure you're strong enough? You almost died. You're still sick. I'll be strong enough. Simone met his eyes. You saved my life. Now help me save my future. Jerome spent the next day preparing. He used his recycling money to buy a prepaid cell phone and loaded it with minutes. He helped Simone practice walking, building up her strength. He found clothes that were relatively clean for both of them. That evening, Simone called Harold Chin from the prepaid phone. Miss Douglas. Chin's voice was frantic. My God, where are you? We've been searching. Reeves lost your GPS signal in the fog, and then we saw the news about the funeral. I'm alive. A man named Jerome Banks pulled me from the water. I've been hiding while I recovered. We need to get you to a hospital, to the police. Tomorrow. At the funeral. I want witnesses. I want Preston to see me. I want everyone to know what he did. That's incredibly risky. I don't care. Can you be there? Yes. Yes, of course. And I'll bring Reeves and his team. We'll have everything ready. Good. Jerome is going to interrupt the funeral. Then I'm going to walk in. Tell the police to be ready. That night, Simone could barely sleep. She kept thinking about Preston at the funeral, crying crocodile tears, accepting condolences, planning how to spend her money. The thought made her sick with rage. Jerome stayed up with her, keeping watch. You know, he said around midnight, you don't have to do this. You could just go to the police now. File charges. And spend months in court while Preston claims I'm crazy, while his lawyers drag my name through the mud. No. I want this over. I want everyone to see the truth. What if he runs? Then we chase him. Jerome smiled slightly. You're tougher than you look. I've had to be. The next morning they prepared carefully. Simone wore the cleanest clothes Jerome had, a pair of jeans and a sweater that were too big but better than nothing. Jerome wore his best outfit, which wasn't saying much. They took a bus to within a mile of the cemetery, then walked the rest of the way. Simone's legs were shaky, her breathing labored, but she kept moving. At the cemetery, they hid behind a mausoleum and watched the funeral begin. Simone saw Preston in his black suit, standing by the casket, accepting hugs from mourners. Veronica was there too, her hand possessively on Preston's arm. That's them, Simone whispered. That's both of them. Jerome saw Chin arrive with 3 other men, probably Reeves and his team. He saw police cars parked discreetly at the cemetery entrance. Everything was in place. The minister started speaking. Jerome looked at Simone. Ready? Ready. He squeezed her hand once, then stood up and started walking toward the grave site. Simone watched him go, her heart pounding. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. She heard Jerome shout, "Bring her out. She's alive." The funeral erupted in chaos. Simone pulled out the prepaid phone and dialed Chen's number. Did they open it? She asked when he answered. They opened it, Chen said. Simone stood up from behind the mausoleum. She was weak, she was exhausted, she probably looked like death, but she was alive. And she was done hiding. Simone walked toward her own funeral on shaking legs. Every step was agony. Her lungs still hurt from the water, her muscles were weak from days of illness, and her head was spinning. But she kept walking. The crowd saw her before Preston did. One woman screamed. A man dropped his phone. Someone shouted, "Oh my God, it's her." Preston turned. His face went white. Veronica grabbed his arm so hard her nails left marks. "Hello, Preston," Simone said. Her voice was rough but clear. "Surprised to see me?" The crowd parted like water. Simone walked through them, Jerome at her side, until she was standing at the edge of her own grave, looking down at the casket that held nothing but sandbags. "Simone." Preston found his voice. "Thank God. We thought you were dead." There was a body, they said it was you. Liar. Simone's voice cut through his excuses. You pushed me off the boat. You drugged my wine, and when I didn't drink it, you pushed me into the lake. You held me under the water with a boat hook. You left me to drown. Gasped from the crowd. Preston's lawyer stepped forward. My client denies these allegations. I have proof. Simone pulled the recording device from her pocket. It was waterlogged, possibly ruined, but she held it up anyway. I recorded everything. Your confession about the life insurance fraud. Your plan to kill me for my inheritance. Preston's mask of shock was slipping. You're obviously confused. The trauma. I'm not confused. I remember every second. I remember you telling me you drugged the wine. I remember you saying you'd contest my grandmother's trust for the $2.3 billion. More gasps. People were pulling out phones, recording everything. And I have a witness, Simone continued. She gestured to Jerome. Jerome Banks pulled me from the water after you left me to die. He saved my life. He kept me alive for 3 days while you planned this funeral and pretended to grieve. A woman from the crowd spoke up. It was the same woman who'd recognized Jerome earlier. Preston, is this true? Did you try to kill Simone? Preston looked around at the crowd. Everyone was staring at him. His lawyer was pale and backing away. Veronica had let go of his arm and taken 2 steps back. This is absurd, Preston said, but his voice shook. Simone, honey, you've been through trauma. Let's get you to a hospital. Don't call me honey. Simone's voice was ice. And I'm not going anywhere with you. The police are already here. Sure enough, 2 officers were walking toward the grave site, Chin leading the way. Mr. Douglas, one officer said, we need you to come with us for questioning. About what? My wife is clearly alive. About the fraudulent life insurance policy. About the body you falsely identified as your wife. About attempted murder. The officer pulled out handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Preston's mask finally cracked. He lunged at Simone. You stupid woman. Do you have any idea what you've ruined? We could have had everything. Jerome stepped between them and the police grabbed Preston. He fought against them, screaming. She's lying. She's making it up. Check the boat, there's no evidence. Actually, Reeves stepped forward, holding a plastic evidence bag. We recovered this from your boat this morning. Life jacket with your wife's DNA on it. Drugged wine in the galley. And a boat hook with evidence of use as a weapon. Preston stopped struggling. His face went gray. The second officer approached Veronica. Miss Grant, you're also under arrest as an accessory to attempted murder. I didn't do anything. Veronica shrieked. I wasn't even there. Ma'am, we have witnesses who saw you on the boat. We also have text messages between you and Mr. Douglas planning this weekend. You're coming with us. As the police led Preston and Veronica away in handcuffs, Simone felt her legs giving out. Jerome caught her before she hit the ground. I got you, he said. Always got you. Chin appeared at her side. Simone, we need to get you to a hospital. You're in shock. No hospital yet. Simone looked at the crowd of people, at the casket holding sandbags, at the grave that should have held her body. I want everyone here to know the truth. I want them to witness this. She pulled out the recording device and handed it to Chin. Can you make this work? Chin examined it. It might be damaged from the water, but we can try. He handed it to Reeves, who pulled out a portable speaker from his equipment bag. A moment later, Preston's voice filled the cemetery. I drugged your wine, obviously. You were supposed to drink it and pass out, and then I'd push you overboard. Tragic anniversary accident. Grieving widower. And as your husband, I'd contest that trust. I'd get something. Maybe not billions, but enough. People in the crowd were crying. Some were recording on their phones. The minister looked like he might be sick. Simone's voice came through next. That money is mine. It's protected. Preston's voice, not if you're dead. The recording went on, capturing the struggle, Simone's screams for help, Veronica asking, is she dead yet? When it ended, silence fell over the cemetery. Then a woman started clapping. Then another. Then dozens of people were applauding, and Simone realized they were clapping for her. For surviving. For fighting back. A reporter pushed forward. Ms. Douglas, how does it feel to attend your own funeral? Surreal, Simone said. But empowering. I died 3 days ago in that lake. The woman standing here now is someone new. Someone stronger. What will you do now? Simone looked at Jerome, who'd stayed by her side through everything. She looked at Chin, who tried to protect her. She looked at the crowd of witnesses who would make sure Preston never hurt anyone again. Now, she said, I'm going to build the life I was meant to have. The hospital room was too bright, too sterile, too loud. Simone had been admitted immediately after the funeral, treated for pneumonia, dehydration, and near drowning. The doctors said she was lucky to be alive. Jerome had saved her life, they said, and just in time. Simone knew she was lucky. But luck wasn't enough. She wanted justice. Detective Rachel Martinez sat beside Simone's hospital bed, her notebook open. I need you to walk me through everything from the beginning. So Simone did. She told Martinez about the inheritance, about Harold Chen's warning, about discovering Preston's affair. She told her about the life insurance policy with the forged signatures. She told her about the boat, the drugged wine, Preston's confession, the attack. Martinez took notes, her expression getting grimmer with each detail. And you recorded all of this? Most of it. I had a recording device in my pocket, but it got waterlogged. Chen's people are trying to recover what they can. The recording we heard at the cemetery, that was the original? Yes. I made a backup to the prepaid phone before we went to the funeral. Smart. Martinez flipped through her notes. And Mr. Banks, Jerome, he witnessed the attack? He heard me screaming. He saw the boat leaving. He pulled me from the water. Where is he now? I don't know. He left before the ambulance arrived. Simone felt a pang of worry. I need to find him. I need to thank him properly. We'll locate him for witness testimony. Martinez closed her notebook. Ms. Douglas, I want you to know that we're taking this case very seriously. We have Preston and Veronica Grant in custody. Their lawyers are already trying to arrange bail, but we're arguing their flight risks. They are flight risks. They were planning to flee to the Cayman Islands after I was dead. How do you know that? Preston mentioned it on the boat. Ann Chen's investigator found plane tickets in Veronica's apartment. Martinez made another note. The more evidence we have, the better. We'll be searching Preston's office, his home, Veronica's apartment. We'll subpoena phone records, bank records, everything. Over the next week, the investigation unfolded like a nightmare for Preston and Veronica. Police found emails between them discussing the Simone problem and how to solve it permanently. They found searches on Preston's computer for drug-resistant drowning and life insurance payout timeline. At Veronica's apartment, they found a burner phone with text to Preston. Did she drink the wine? Is it done? We need to move the money before anyone notices. The money they were talking about wasn't Simone's inheritance. It was embezzlement. Detective Martinez visited Simone's hospital room with an accountant from the fraud division. Ms. Douglas, were you aware that your husband and Ms. Grant were embezzling from Douglas Grant Development? Simone sat up straighter in bed. What? We found irregularities in the company's accounts going back 2 years. Fake vendors, inflated invoices, money disappearing into offshore accounts. Approximately $3.7 million has been stolen from the company and its investors. Simone felt sick. I had no idea. I didn't even know the details of Preston's business. We're going to need access to any financial records you have. Joint bank accounts, tax returns, anything that might show where the money went. Simone gave them everything. Bank statements showed large transfers she'd never authorized. Credit cards had charges she'd never made. Preston had been stealing from her too, draining their joint accounts to fund his affair and embezzlement scheme. By the time Simone was released from the hospital a week later, the charges against Preston and Veronica had expanded from attempted murder to include fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and conspiracy. The district attorney was calling it one of the most brazen murder-for-money schemes he'd ever seen. Chen picked Simone up from the hospital in a town car. How are you feeling? Tired? Angry? Vindicated. I've arranged for you to stay at a secure location until the trial. Your townhouse is technically a crime scene, and anyway, I wouldn't recommend going back there. I don't want to go back. I never want to see that place again. Chen drove her to a luxury hotel with 24-hour security. The suite was beautiful, but all Simone could think about was Jerome, living in that abandoned warehouse, surviving on recycled cans. I need to find Jerome, she told Chen. He saved my life. I need to help him. Reeves is looking for him. He'll turn up. But Jerome didn't turn up. Not that day or the next or the one after that. Reeves checked the warehouse, the river, the shelters. Jerome had vanished. Simone was frantic. Had something happened to him? Had Preston's lawyers scared him off? She offered a reward for information, but nobody had seen him. Finally, 2 weeks after the funeral, Jerome called the prepaid phone he'd given Simone. I'm sorry I disappeared, he said. I'm not good with attention. All those reporters, all those questions. Where are you? Are you safe? I'm fine. Still at the warehouse. Still collecting cans. He paused. I saw you on the news. The lawyers say Preston's going to prison for a long time. Probably. The trial starts in 2 months. Jerome, I need you to testify. You're the only witness to what happened on the lake. I know. I'll be there. I promise. I want to help you, Simone said. You saved my life. Let me repay you. You don't owe me anything. Please. Let me buy you dinner at least. Let me say thank you properly. Jerome was quiet for a long moment. Okay, dinner. But somewhere quiet. Not fancy. They met at a small diner on the edge of town. Jerome looked better than he had at the funeral, like he'd been eating regularly. Simone handed him an envelope across the table. What's this? He asked. Open it. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a letter from a property management company about a furnished apartment, paid for a year in advance. Jerome stared at the check. Simone, I can't accept this. You can and you will. You saved my life. This is the least I can do. It's too much. It's not nearly enough. Simone reached across the table and took his hand. You gave me a second chance at life. Let me give you a second chance too. Jerome's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. Say you'll testify against Preston. Say you'll help me make sure he never hurts anyone again. I'll testify. I promise. Over dinner they talked about the case, about the investigation, about what came next. Jerome told Simone about his plans to use the money to get clean, to go to AA meetings, to look for work. I used to be good at something, he said. I can be good at something again. I know you can. When they parted ways that night, Simone felt lighter than she had in weeks. She had an ally, a friend, someone who'd seen her at her absolute worst and still believed in her. Back at the hotel, Chen was waiting with news. The DA wants to meet with you tomorrow. They're building the case and they want to go over your testimony. What about the recording? Were they able to recover it? Most of it. Enough to show intent and premeditation. Combined with the physical evidence and Jerome's eyewitness account, they think they have a strong case. Good, Simone said. I want Preston to rot in prison for what he did. About that, Chen said carefully. Preston's lawyers are suggesting a plea deal. If he pleads guilty to attempted murder and fraud, they'll recommend 15 years instead of 25. No deals, Simone said flatly. I want a trial. I want a jury to hear everything he did. I want everyone to know. Chen nodded. I'll let the DA know. That night, Simone couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Preston, about the years she'd wasted loving someone who'd only seen her as a meal ticket. She thought about Veronica, who'd helped plan her murder for money. But mostly she thought about Jerome, who'd had nothing and given everything to save a stranger. Simone made a decision. When this was all over, when justice was served, she would use her inheritance to help people like Jerome. People who'd fallen through the cracks. People who needed second chances. Preston had tried to take everything from her. Instead, he'd given her purpose. The district attorney's office was all glass and steel, modern and imposing. Simone sat across from DA Catherine Torres, a sharp woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. Ms. Douglas, I want to be clear about what we're facing, Torres said, spreading files across the conference table. Preston Douglas has expensive lawyers. They're going to argue that you're lying, that you staged this whole thing for attention or money. They're going to paint you as unstable, greedy, vindictive. Let them try, Simone said. I have evidence. Evidence can be explained away. The recording could be claimed as coerced or edited. The drugs in the wine could be argued as planted. We need more than physical evidence. We need a narrative that the jury can't ignore. Torres pulled out a timeline she'd constructed. This is what we know. 3 weeks before the boating incident, you meet with Harold Chen about your inheritance. That same week, Preston searches online for life insurance policies. 2 weeks before, he takes out a $500,000 policy on you with forged signatures. 1 week before, he books the cabin at Lake Serenity. 3 days before, he purchases the drugs found in the wine. This shows premeditation. Simone studied the timeline. What about Veronica? Her phone records show she was texting Preston the entire drive up to the cabin. She rented a car and followed you there. She was on that boat, which makes her an accessory to attempted murder. We also have the embezzlement charges, which establishes motive and pattern of criminal behavior. Over the next month, Simone worked closely with the DA's office. She went over every detail of her marriage, looking for signs she'd missed. Torres had her meet with a forensic accountant who'd traced the embezzled money through a maze of offshore accounts. Preston and Veronica were planning to flee, the accountant explained. They had plane tickets to the Cayman Islands for the day after your funeral. They'd already transferred $2 million to banks there. If you'd actually died, they would have been gone before anyone noticed the missing money. Simone also worked with Chen and his team to understand her inheritance. The trust was vast and complex, with holdings in pharmaceutical patents, real estate and technology companies. Her grandmother had been a brilliant investor, turning an initial fortune into billions. What do you want to do with it? Chen asked during one of their meetings. I don't know yet, Simone admitted. It's overwhelming. You don't have to decide now. The trust has managers who can handle the day-to-day operations. But eventually you'll need a plan. Simone thought about Jerome, about the warehouse where he'd lived, about the thousands of other people living on the streets with no hope of escape. I want to help people, she said. People who've been forgotten. People who need second chances. Chen smiled. Your grandmother would have liked that. The preliminary hearing was set for 6 weeks after the funeral. Preston and Veronica both pleaded not guilty. Their lawyers filed motions to suppress evidence, to exclude testimony, to delay the trial. Torres fought every motion and won most of them. Jerome came to the courthouse for his deposition, clean and sober, wearing a suit Simone had bought him. He testified clearly and calmly about pulling Simone from the water, about hearing her scream, about seeing the boat speed away. Preston's lawyer tried to discredit him. Mr. Banks, you're homeless, correct? I was homeless at the time, yes. You have a history of alcoholism? I've been sober for 8 weeks now. How can the court trust the testimony of someone with your background? Jerome looked the lawyer straight in the eye. I pulled a dying woman from the water. I kept her alive for 3 days with almost nothing. I went to her funeral to tell the truth when I could have just walked away. My background is that I saved her life. What's yours? The courtroom erupted in applause. The judge had to bang his gavel for order. The lawyer backed down. After the hearing, Simone hugged Jerome tightly. Thank you. Just telling the truth, Jerome said. That night, Simone had dinner with Chen and Torres to discuss strategy. The trial was set for 8 weeks out. They needed to be ready. Preston's defense is going to be that you're lying about the inheritance, Torres said. They'll claim you made it up to make yourself seem like a target. But the trust is real. Chen can testify to that. They'll say you're exaggerating the amount. They'll claim $2.3 billion is too much money for anyone to believe. Simone felt a flash of anger. So they're calling me a liar and saying my grandmother's fortune is too big to be real? Essentially, yes. Then let's prove it. Let's bring in the trust documents. Let's show the jury exactly what Preston was trying to steal. Chen cleared his throat. Simone, that might not be wise. Once that information is public, you'll have no privacy. Everyone will know you're a billionaire. I don't care about privacy. I care about justice. Torres and Chen exchanged glances. All right, Torres said. We'll present the full trust documents as evidence. It'll make Preston's motive crystal clear. Over the next few weeks, Simone prepared for trial. She met with jury consultants, with image experts, with media trainers. Everyone wanted her to look perfect, sympathetic, trustworthy. But Simone didn't want to look perfect. She wanted to look like what she was, a survivor. She refused to hide the scars from where Preston had grabbed her arms on the boat. She refused to cover the dark circles under her eyes from months of stress and nightmares. She wanted the jury to see what Preston had done to her. The media attention was intense. Reporters camped outside her hotel. They called her the billionaire bride and the funeral survivor. They wrote breathless articles about the inheritance, the murder plot, the dramatic revelation at the cemetery. Simone hated it, but Torres said it was good. The more publicity, the more pressure on the jury to get this right. Preston can't hide from this. 3 days before the trial started, Simone visited Jerome at his new apartment. It was small but clean, with furniture and a stocked kitchen. Jerome had gained weight, looked healthier, had started going to AA meetings. How are you feeling about testifying? Simone asked. Nervous, but ready. Jerome poured them coffee. I keep thinking about that day at the lake. What would have happened if I hadn't been there? I'd be dead. Yeah. And Preston would have gotten away with it. Simone sipped her coffee. I've been thinking about what I want to do with the trust money. I want to create a foundation. For people experiencing homelessness. Job training, housing assistance, mental health services, addiction support. Jerome's eyes widened. That's incredible. I want you to help me run it. You understand what people on the streets need. You've lived it. Simone, I don't know anything about running a foundation. You'll learn. We'll hire people who know the business side. But I need someone who knows the human side. Someone who cares. She reached across the table and took his hand. I need someone I trust. That's you. Jerome was quiet for a long moment. Okay, he finally said. I'll do it. The night before the trial, Simone lay in bed at the hotel, staring at the ceiling. She thought about Preston in his jail cell, probably sleeping soundly, probably still convinced his lawyers would get him off. She thought about Veronica, who'd helped plan Simone's murder for money and Preston's attention. She thought about the jury who would decide their fates. And she thought about herself, the woman she'd been before the boat, and the woman she was now. Simone had died in that lake. The woman who'd lived in fear, who'd ignored warning signs, who'd let Preston control her life, she was gone. The woman who'd been reborn was stronger. Angrier. More determined. Tomorrow she'd face Preston in court. She'd look him in the eye and tell the world what he'd done. And then she'd watch him lose everything, just like he'd tried to make her lose everything. Justice was coming. The courtroom was packed. Simone sat at the prosecution table next to De Torres, her hands folded in her lap, her spine straight. Across the aisle, Preston sat with his defense team, 3 lawyers in expensive suits. He wouldn't look at her. Veronica was at a separate table with her own lawyer. She kept glancing at Preston, but he ignored her too. Their alliance had crumbled under pressure. The jury filed in, 7 women, 5 men, diverse ages and backgrounds. Simone studied their faces, trying to read them, but they were carefully neutral. Judge Patricia Hammond called the court to order. The people versus Preston Douglas and Veronica Grant. The charges are attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. How do the defendants plead? Not guilty, Preston's lead lawyer said. Not guilty, Veronica's lawyer echoed. Torres stood for her opening statement. She was calm, methodical, devastating. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a case about greed. About a man who decided his wife was worth more dead than alive. Preston Douglas married Simone Patterson 5 years ago. She thought she'd found love. He thought he'd found a meal ticket. Torres outlined the timeline: the inheritance, the affair, the life insurance fraud, the embezzlement scheme, the murder attempt. Preston Douglas drugged his wife's wine. When she refused to drink it, he physically assaulted her and threw her off a boat in the middle of a lake. He held her underwater with a boat hook. He left her to drown. Then he went to the morgue and falsely identified a Jane Doe as his wife so he could claim her inheritance and flee the country with his mistress. Torres pointed at the evidence table where the boat hook, the drugged wine, the recording device, and dozens of other pieces of evidence were displayed. But Simone Douglas didn't die. A homeless man named Jerome Banks pulled her from the water. He saved her life. And when Preston tried to bury an empty casket and collect her money, Simone showed up at her own funeral to expose his crimes. The jury was riveted. Preston's lawyer, a man named Robert Hutchins, gave his opening next. He argued that Simone was mentally unstable, that she'd staged the whole thing for attention, that the recording was edited, that Jerome was an unreliable witness with everything to gain by lying. The prosecution wants you to believe my client is a monster, Hutchins said. But Preston Douglas is a successful businessman who loved his wife. This case is built on coincidence and conjecture, not facts. Simone's fingernails bit into her palms. She wanted to scream at him, to call him a liar, but Torres had warned her to stay calm, to trust the process. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Torres called witness after witness. Harold Chin testified about the trust and Preston's reaction when he learned about the inheritance. The forensic accountant testified about the embezzlement. The insurance investigator testified about the forged signatures on the life insurance policy. Medical examiners testified about the drugs found in Simone's system and the injuries consistent with assault. Marine experts testified that the marks on Simone's body matched the boat hook found on Preston's boat. And then Jerome took the stand. He wore a simple suit and spoke quietly but clearly. He told the jury about hearing screams from the lake, about rowing out in the fog, about finding Simone floating face down in the water. I pulled her onto the shore and did see her, Jerome said. She wasn't breathing. I thought she was dead. But then she coughed up water and started breathing again. What did you do then? Torres asked. I took her to my camp. I didn't have money for a hospital and I was afraid. If someone tried to kill her once, they might try again. Why didn't you call the police? Jerome looked at the jury. I'm homeless. I don't have ID. I've had bad experiences with police. I thought if I showed up with a dying woman, they'd arrest me instead of helping her. So you kept her safe? I did my best. I used my bottle money to buy medicine when she got sick. I stayed up for 3 days watching her breathe. And when I found the newspaper saying she was dead, I knew we had to do something. Hutchins tried to discredit Jerome on cross-examination. Mr. Banks, you have a criminal record, don't you? I have 2 arrests for public intoxication from when I was drinking. I've been sober since saving Ms. Douglas. You're currently living in an apartment paid for by Ms. Douglas, correct? Yes. And she's given you money? She gave me $50,000 as a thank you for saving her life. So you have a financial interest in seeing my client convicted? Jerome's jaw tightened. I have an interest in telling the truth. That man tried to murder a woman I saved. I'm not going to let him get away with it because he's rich and I'm not. The courtroom erupted in applause again. Judge Hammond gavelled for order, but even she looked impressed. When it was time for Simone to testify, Torres led her through every detail. The inheritance, the affair, the lake, the attack. Simone looked directly at the jury as she spoke. Preston told me he drugged my wine. He said I was supposed to drink it and pass out so he could push me overboard and make it look like an accident. When I confronted him about the affair, he laughed and said I was stupid. Then he grabbed me and threw me into the water. What do you remember after hitting the water? Torres asked. I remember going under. I remember not being able to breathe. I remember Preston pushing my head down with the boat hook. I remember thinking I was going to die. Simone's voice broke. I remember giving up. And then Jerome pulled me out. Hutchins was brutal on cross-examination. Miss Douglas, you admit you recorded your husband without his knowledge? Yes. Some might call that entrapment. I call it survival. You stand to inherit $2.3 billion from your grandmother's trust? Yes. Quite a motive to stage an attack and frame your husband, wouldn't you say? Simone looked him dead in the eye. If I wanted to frame Preston, I wouldn't have nearly died doing it. I have scars on my lungs from drowning. I have nightmares every night about water filling my mouth. I spent 3 days in a warehouse with pneumonia because I was too afraid to go to a hospital. Does that sound like someone who staged an attack? Hutchins had no response. The final piece of evidence was the recording. Torres played it for the jury. Preston's voice filled the courtroom. I drugged your wine, obviously. Tragic anniversary accident. Grieving widower. Not if you're dead. Several jurors looked sick. One was crying. When the prosecution rested, Hutchins put on a weak defense. Preston didn't testify. His lawyers knew he'd be destroyed on cross-examination. Veronica did testify, claiming she wasn't on the boat, that the witnesses were mistaken, that she knew nothing about any murder plot. The jury didn't believe her. Her phone records and the boat rental records proved she was lying. In his closing argument, Hutchins tried to argue reasonable doubt. Torres demolished it. Preston Douglas left his wife to die, Torres said. He held her underwater. He left her in that lake while he drove away with his mistress. He identified a stranger's body as Simone so he could collect her money. This isn't reasonable doubt. This is a man who committed attempted murder and almost got away with it. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the forewoman stood. On the charge of attempted murder, we find the defendant Preston Douglas guilty. Simone closed her eyes. Relief flooded through her. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant Veronica Grant guilty. They were guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, forgery. All of it. Sentencing was set for 2 weeks later. Simone sat in the courtroom again, watching Preston stand before the judge. Judge Hammond looked at him with disgust. Mr. Douglas, you tried to murder your wife for money. You forged documents, committed fraud, and showed no remorse. I'm sentencing you to 25 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. Preston's face went white. His lawyers tried to argue for leniency. Hammond shut them down. Veronica got 20 years for her role as an accessory. As the bailiffs led them away in handcuffs, Preston finally looked at Simone. There was no apology in his eyes. Only hatred. Simone looked back at him calmly. She'd won. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Simone gave one statement. Justice has been served. I'm grateful to everyone who helped me survive and to the jury who saw the truth. Now I'm going to focus on rebuilding my life and helping others do the same. That night, Simone, Jerome, Chin, Torres, and Reeves celebrated at a quiet restaurant. They toasted to justice, to truth, to survival. What's next for you? Torres asked Simone. Simone looked at Jerome. We're starting a foundation. The Second Chances Foundation. For people experiencing homelessness. Second chances, Jerome repeated. I like that. Simone smiled. Preston tried to end my life. Instead, he gave me a chance to start over. To do something meaningful. To help people who need it most. Your grandmother would be proud, Chin said. Simone thought about her grandmother who'd lived simply while sitting on billions. Who'd waited until Simone was mature enough to handle the responsibility. Who'd protected her inheritance from people like Preston. I hope so, Simone said. I really hope so. 1 year later, Simone stood on the stage of the Grand Harbor Hotel ballroom, looking out at 500 people in formal wear. The Second Chances Foundation's first anniversary gala was in full swing, raising money for the programs that had already helped thousands of people. When I started this foundation, Simone said into the microphone, I had just survived my own attempt at a second chance. I'd literally come back from the dead, and I knew I couldn't waste the life I'd been given. The audience was silent, listening. In the past year, we've helped over 5,000 people transition out of homelessness. We've opened 3 job training centers, established a network of transitional housing in 5 cities, and partnered with medical clinics to provide free healthcare to those who need it most. Applause filled the room. Simone waited for it to die down. But numbers don't tell the real story. The real story is people. People like Jerome Banks, who saved my life and is now our director of outreach, using his experiences to help others navigate the path back to stability. Jerome stood from his table and waved. He looked completely different from the man who'd pulled her from the water. Clean, healthy, confident. He'd been sober for a year and had become the foundation's most valuable asset, understanding what their clients needed in ways no housed person could. People like Maria Santos, who came to us 6 months ago after losing her job and her apartment. Today, she's employed at our office as an intake coordinator, helping others just like her. A woman in the audience stood and smiled. Simone had hired 3 former clients as staff members, believing that lived experience was invaluable. People like Michael Chin, who served our country for 8 years before PTSD and addiction left him on the streets. He's now 2 months sober and training to be a peer support specialist. The foundation had expanded faster than Simone had dreamed possible. The $2.3 billion trust gave her resources that most nonprofits couldn't imagine. She'd hired the best staff, partnered with top organizations and implemented evidence-based programs. But she'd also stayed hands-on. She visited the housing facilities weekly, talked to clients, listened to their stories. She'd learned that homelessness wasn't about laziness or choice. It was about trauma, bad luck, mental illness, addiction, domestic violence, medical debt. Things that could happen to anyone. After the gala, Simone found Jerome on the hotel terrace, looking out at the city lights. Quite a party, he said. You made it possible, Simone replied, joining him at the railing. None of this works without you. You would have figured it out. Maybe. But it wouldn't be the same. Simone thought about the past year. About building the foundation from nothing. About finding her purpose. About transforming her inheritance from a curse that nearly killed her into a blessing that was changing lives. Do you ever think about Preston? Jerome asked. Sometimes. Mostly I'm just relieved he's in prison where he belongs. Preston's appeals had all been denied. He was serving his 25 years at a maximum security facility upstate. Veronica was in a women's prison, her parole hearing set for 18 years from now. Simone had divorced Preston while he was awaiting trial. She'd kept nothing from their marriage except her maiden name, which she'd legally changed back to. She was Simone Patterson again, the woman her grandmother had known and loved. I heard Veronica's been trying to contact you, Jerome said. She writes letters. I don't read them. Simone had no interest in hearing excuses or apologies. Veronica had helped Preston try to kill her. That was unforgivable. Good. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city. Simone thought about how much had changed. She'd moved out of hotels and into a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. She'd hired a small security team. The threat was minimal now, but Chen insisted. She'd made friends with her foundation staff. She'd started dating again, though nothing serious yet. She'd learned to cook, joined a book club, adopted a rescue dog named Hope. Most importantly, she'd found purpose. I have an idea for the next expansion, Jerome said. What if we opened a center specifically for veterans? Partner with the VA, provide specialized trauma therapy, help them navigate benefits. I love that. Write up a proposal. Already did. Jerome pulled out his phone and showed her a detailed plan. He'd become an incredible advocate and administrator, his software engineering background helping him think systematically about complex problems. "This is perfect," Simone said, reading through it. "Let's make it happen." Her phone buzzed. Harold Chin was texting. "The trust earned $147 million in interest this quarter. Board wants to know your distribution preferences." Simone smiled. Even after putting hundreds of millions into the foundation, the trust kept growing. She had more money than she could ever spend. "Everything okay?" Jerome asked. "More than okay. I just got the quarterly trust report. We can fund the Veterans Center and still have money left over." "For what?" "I've been thinking about education initiatives. Scholarships for people transitioning out of homelessness. GED programs. College access." "You're going to change the world," Jerome said. "I'm going to try." They went back inside for the final part of the gala, the award ceremony. Simone presented the Foundation Leadership Award to a woman named Dr. Patricia Holmes, who'd pioneered trauma-informed care for homeless populations. As Dr. Holmes gave her acceptance speech, Simone looked around the ballroom. She saw Foundation staff, volunteers, donors, clients, and community partners. She saw people who believed in second chances. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, drowning in that lake, giving up, ready to die. She thought about Jerome pulling her from the water and saying, "I got you." She thought about showing up at her own funeral and exposing Preston's crimes. She thought about the moment the jury said guilty, and knowing that justice had been served. All of it had led her here, to this moment, to this work, to this life. Preston had tried to kill her for money. Instead, he'd given her everything she'd ever wanted: freedom, purpose, and the chance to make a real difference. After the gala, Simone drove home to her modest house. Hope the dog greeted her at the door, tail wagging. Simone changed out of her formal gown, made tea, and sat on her porch looking at the stars. Her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Is this Simone Patterson?" A woman's voice, nervous. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Angela Torres. I don't know if you remember me, but I was at your funeral. At the cemetery. I saw everything that happened." Simone did remember her vaguely. One of the mourners who'd applauded when the truth came out. "I remember you. I've been following your foundation's work. What you're doing is incredible. And I need help. I lost my job 3 months ago. I'm about to lose my apartment. I have 2 kids. I don't know what to do." Simone's heart ached. "Come to our office tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. We'll figure this out." "Really? You'll help me?" "That's what we do. We help people who need second chances." Angela started crying. "Thank you. Thank you so much." After hanging up, Simone sat for a long time thinking. This was why she'd built the foundation. For people like Angela, like Jerome, like all the thousands of others who just needed someone to believe in them. She pulled out her laptop and started writing an email to the foundation board. "Proposal: expand our family services division. Too many parents are falling through the cracks. We need emergency assistance funds, childcare support, job placement for parents with school-age kids." As she wrote, ideas flowed. New programs. New partnerships. New ways to help. Preston was in prison. Veronica was in prison. The money they tried to steal was being used to change lives instead of fund their escape. Simone had died in that lake. But the woman who'd been reborn was exactly who she was meant to be. Strong. Purpose-driven. Unafraid. A survivor who'd become a warrior. A victim who'd become a victor. A woman who'd turned her tragedy into someone else's triumph. She looked up at the stars and silently thanked her grandmother for the inheritance, for the protection, for believing that Simone would use the money wisely. She thanked Jerome for pulling her from the water and giving her life back. She even thanked Preston, in a twisted way, for showing her who she really was underneath all the fear. The Second Chances Foundation was just the beginning. Simone had decades ahead of her and billions of dollars to deploy strategically. She would build an empire, not of wealth but of hope. And she would make sure that everyone who came to her for help got the same thing Jerome had given her that day in the fog. A hand pulling them to safety. A voice saying, "I got you. The second chance at life."